Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Megan Shamus. I am the Senior Director of Marketing at the FIDO Alliance. It's nice to see so many names that I recognize on the webinar list today, so thank you for coming. Today, we're looking forward to covering our newest set of UX guidelines, and those are for FIDO security keys. The FIDO Alliance has a committee dedicated to UX considerations for FIDO authentication, which you may or may not know, but I am excited to welcome two of its members to present today. We have Kevin Goldman, who is the Chief Experience Officer at Trusona and is the chair of the committee. And we have Judy Clare, the Vice President and Product Manager for Digital Authentication at JPMorgan Chase. Before we get started, I thought it would be helpful just to go through a few housekeeping items. So you're on the On24 platform. You'll see several widgets. You can make them bigger or smaller. Usually you might need to make the media player a little bigger and the slides a little bigger. You can adjust that to your preferences. So we will be showing a video through the media player. And we will be showing slides. We just recommend you have those visible. You're all in listen only mode. Please do leverage the question widget. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So please do leverage that throughout the presentation, and then we'll have time to answer them at the end. We will be doing some polling questions, so please do respond to those when they come up. We are recording the webinar. We will send you the recording and the slides via email following the presentation, and we'll also post them on our website. And lastly, please do stay on to take the survey at the end of the webinar. We really appreciate that, and it really helps us to inform our educational programs, including webinars like this. But before I pass things off to Judy and Kevin, I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about FIDO and its increasing focus on user experience. So you might be thinking, why? So you may know that the FIDO Alliance mission is to move the world beyond passwords with simpler and phishing-resistant standards-based authentication. But putting standards out into the world is one thing, but in order to really achieve that mission and move the world beyond passwords, we need FIDO to be as ubiquitous as passwords are. And that means they're supported in every device, every browser, and every operating system. So it's good to know, and I'm happy to report that we're there. Through the collaboration of the FIDO Alliance and its members, we're working towards that and really have achieved a great amount of device ubiquity. Indeed, as close to passwords, every device, every browser, every operating system, that's where we want to be. There's also a wide range of global online services offering FIDO-based sign-ins today. This is only a partial list, but this is just an example of the global nature and the large brands that have adopted FIDO sign-ins, and millions of consumers are using that today. So there's so many successes on our side: mature specs, platform and browser support, a good array of global implementations, but really, how do we get to that mass adoption, right? We're going to be putting some research out soon, but I just took a look at the findings, and not surprisingly, the majority of folks are still using passwords. We know that. We see data breaches still happening. We know that this is still sort of status quo, but that we are getting things on our side to achieve that mass adoption. So for us at the FIDO Alliance, we really see usability as being the key to keeping our to reaching mass adoption, but also we need to keep our core security principles a priority, of course. The phishing resistance is really the thing that differentiates FIDO from everything else. So there's two pieces to this of the usability. In a FIDO world where credentials are device-based, how do we solve for account recovery in this model if someone loses a device or just gets a new one, right? So that's kind of a burdensome thing, where often they need to revert back to a password, which is not what we're going for, right? And the second is, how do service providers provide consistent messaging, visuals, and login experience so that users are enticed to enroll and subsequently log in with FIDO? These things are both really important for us to achieve that mass adoption. So you may have heard of a little thing that we like to call passkeys. So to address that first issue of usability across devices, we've introduced passkeys. So passkeys simply allow consumers to access their FIDO credentials where they need them across most of their devices. So that is meant to solve for that account recovery issue that I mentioned earlier. And passkeys will be supported in leading device platforms this year, and they're actually available today in iOS because that new iOS just came out this week. And the answer to that second piece, which is really why we're here today, is providing UX guidance to service providers so that they can optimize their enrollment and login flows to achieve maximum enrollment and logins with FIDO. That's how everyone can achieve the benefit of FIDO. So in 2021, we released the guidelines for built-in platform authenticators, which you can find on our website. And I know Kevin will reference that URL in a little bit. And more recently, we released the security key guidelines that we're here to talk about today. So with that, let's talk about what we're here for today, which is the security key guidelines. And I'll hand things over to Judy to kick off that discussion.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you all for coming today and joining us. We want to talk to you, as Megan said, about optimizing the user experience with FIDO keys. So first, let's try and level the playing field a little bit here and just see what everybody kind of knows or doesn't know about security keys. So first, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. You're going to see some yes/no buttons here. Please respond, give you a couple seconds, and we'll review the results. So first, how many of you here have actually already implemented security keys for authentication on your sites? So click on the buttons and we will give another second or two. Okay, so, about a third have. Okay, so that's probably about what we expected. A little higher, that's great. Next, how many of you have it on your roadmap for the coming year, or you've already started implementing it? Give you another second or two here. Okay. Ooh, nobody answered. Okay, well, maybe we have better luck with the next one. So how many of you use keys personally, or you're using them for your work? And we'll just give it another second or two. So I know there's varying degrees. Some companies are using them. Oh, great. Well, a lot of people are using it. That's fantastic. Really great to see. It's higher than I thought. That's wonderful. And here's the last one, and there's no judgment. Please answer honestly. Who here has no idea what a security key is? They're here to really learn about it and understand what it is and why it's important. Please answer honestly. Again, nobody knows who answered what. No judgment. Okay, let's see how that went. Oh, okay. And thank you for those people who were honest and said they didn't have a clue. Hopefully by the end of this, we will uncover any mysteries you may have and answer most all of your questions. And if not, as you'll hear several times, we have links to the demo and to the guidelines, and we're going to provide best practices that have come out of both throughout this presentation. So stay tuned and let's get on with it. So why are we here today? We are here to discuss security keys. And just as I said, let's just start with a clean slate, make sure everybody's on the same page. What is a security key? You'll see a picture of a sample of one here. And basically a security key is a piece of hardware that is as small as your pinky nail, or it could be as big as a mailbox key. So they're quite small. It's encrypted, it's FIDO compliant. They're easy to use. You just plug them into the USB, USB-C, or Lightning port, or you might just tap it depending on the key that you have. And that will allow users to access a site or complete a transaction. And the beauty of the security key is that you can use one key across most all of your devices, depending on the port, and it's used by any site that supports it. So you can use the same key across all your sites, which is really convenient as opposed to having to have a separate key for each site. So that's very convenient. So we're seeing that these are being used more and more globally by more and more companies. And because of that, the FIDO Alliance UX Task Force has decided that we should really start looking into this more deeply. And they developed a prototype, and we've done some observational research that we're going to talk to you about in just a minute to really further develop that prototype, come up with some guidelines that are in a link right here for you to access whenever you have a moment. And we'll share the highlights and best practices that have come out of all of this. So stay tuned, and we will give you some more information. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin, who will discuss the approach that we used for this research and for the prototypes.
Thanks so much, Judy. And thanks, FIDO. And thank you all for attending, either live right now or perhaps on demand later. So let's go through the approach. Now, you saw the link there, fidoalliance.org/UX-guidelines. That's where you can go get the guidelines. And there's so much good information in there. But here we want to go in, we're going to go through some highlights, but I first want to go through the approach that we took so that you know how the best practices were originated. And I really want to build some trust. We want to build some trust with you that the process was sound and that the guidelines and the best practices that we published in the guidelines are sound, and you can use them with great results. So what is the process? It's a process called observational UX research. We did not run sort of a marketing survey that asks people what they would want to do with the security key. There's nothing wrong with marketing surveys. It's just that for UX guidance and guidelines, we need to do UX research. So what does this look like? I'll go through some of the steps. First step is to assemble a cross-disciplinary and diverse team. So the folks that worked on this project to originate these guidelines were all over the map, quite literally. We had companies from all over the world. We had relying parties, which are brands who implement security keys. We have vendors like the company I'm with, Trusona. We have platform providers that were part of the project. We had sites like login.gov that have implemented security keys. They were all part of the project to bring together these best practices and guidelines. We then set out and found 6 well-known websites that already have implemented the ability to use security keys. And we ran a UX audit on each 6. Lots of really good information that we learned. Commonalities between the 6. We learned where some friction was. We learned where some things were being done very well. And we took all that learning into the next step, which is we made clickable prototypes. These are prototypes that are made in design tools that allow you to just click through a security key experience. We then recruited the right target user. Now, Judy's going to talk a little bit about who this user is. It's important to know what the scope was that we tested for. And it was actually takes a lot of work to recruit the right kind of people. We then asked them to complete security key related tasks using the clickable prototype. And the key here is that they have specific tasks, and we simply observe them. We observe where the friction is, where the questions are, where some delightful moments are in those experiences. And that's where you get at the good best practices. That's where you get at the places that aren't working well. And then we can iterate on those places that aren't working well in those user journeys. We didn't stop there. With the help of Jasmine and Shane over at IBM, they created a coded prototype. Now, this is a fully functioning website that has a fictitious banking website that allows people to sign in and use a security key. And we ran the same process after many revisions with those participants. Attempting to go to the next click, but it doesn't seem to want to go to the next click. So I'll just talk through it. We then asked the participants to complete those tasks in the coded prototype, and we learned even more, because at that point it's high fidelity. It's the highest fidelity. We actually get to see the use of the hardware, the other connected hardware, questions about the different kinds of hardware and the workflows that the participants were going through. And then all of these, I'm going to manually click to the next item here. All of this process came together to produce the best practices that you now have at your fingertips. And lastly, I want to mention who we designed these systems, the guidelines for. We really wanted to make sure that product managers, UX designers, UX researchers, UX copywriters, and other stakeholders would have, that they would find the information in these guidelines helpful. Now with that, I'm going to hand it over to Judy to talk about the scope of the research.
Thanks, Kevin. Very insightful. Let's see if we can progress this. There we go. So great. So let's talk about the scope of the research. And basically there were 5 parts to our research, as you can see here. So let's start with explaining each of them. So going through them one at a time. First is awareness. And awareness talks about making sure that users know that security keys are actually available on your site. As Kevin mentioned in our audit, there's a lot of, not a lot, but some of the sites that we audited didn't really say, and you had to kind of look for it. So it's all about how do we let users know that security keys are available? Be loud, be proud. You know, it took work to get them there. They're very useful, convenient, and secure, as we discussed. So make sure that they're aware of it prior to sign in, at sign in, or after sign in. Then we talked about consideration. We looked at how you educate your users, how you make them be able to compare the different authentication options that are available, and really let them know the benefits of a security key and is it right for them. So the consideration really goes all around the education and making sure that you're guiding the users through their journey. We looked at enrollment and how we would have users enroll their first key, what information we'd be providing along the way. So that kind of ties in with your education, and how they would be adding additional security keys, which is very important that they have multiple keys, which we will also talk about. Then we looked at management, and it's exactly that, managing security keys on the site. So it's confirming once users have added a key, how would they name and rename their keys, how they would add or remove a key. So basically managing a keys for the site. Lastly, we considered authentication. So how the users would actually sign in, sign out, how they would work it with username, passwords, and the security key, and also how they would work it if they had multiple accounts on a site. So we looked at several things on that. So let's look at the participants that we use, the end users that we considered. So as Kevin said, we targeted users to evaluate the prototype that we could observe, and we identified 68 end users to participate. How did we pick them? We looked for users who were security-minded, tech-savvy, really privacy-aware, privacy-conscious, what we call a prosumer. So someone who's almost a professional consumer, very technically aware. As such, we had these 68 participants divided into 2 groups. Half of them already had security keys and were quite familiar with them, as many of you are. Others were, they didn't have a key yet. They were aware of them. They knew they were out there, but they didn't actually have one and didn't have a whole lot of experience. So we got it from both ends of the spectrum, which was very helpful. So the security keys that we used, while I said before that there were varying ranges of security keys that you could plug into a port or tap, we focused on the non-biometric security key that plugs into a port. So as we look at the industry that we focused on regulated industry. And that was for several reasons. They tend to have the broader requirements and more needs. So we figure that any other industry would be able to adopt the standards that were put here, maybe skinny it down if it was more appropriate for them, or it would be harder to go the other way. And this way we could get the most standardization and the most delightful experience across sites. So that's why we targeted the regulated industries. And we thought about healthcare, insurance, financial services, telecoms, all highly regulated. We settled on financial institutions, and you'll see that our demo site is actually called Digital Bank. It's a generic bank, and that's what we use to have the participants go in and out and try various tasks. We focused on desktop browsers, and while I said earlier that a security key can be used across multiple devices, all types, be it your phone, your tablet, your laptop computer, we focused on just desktop browsers, but the experience would be similar across the other devices as well. Now I'm going to talk here about what's out of scope, because it's just as important to know what we didn't consider as well as what we did and why. So we didn't consider security policies and account recovery guidelines because those tend to be very specific to individual companies and industries, and do not want to get hung up on that because it could vary just so widely. Account recovery guidelines, likewise, it could be very specific to a company. We did not also include purchasing or providing keys because that also would be very personal to a company. They could have different relationships with vendors, with their customers. They might want to give the keys as promotional or part of an account to their customers. Or what we've seen with a lot of companies is users bring their own keys because they're so easy to purchase. Places like Amazon, Best Buy, wherever, you can easily purchase a key, and it's very easy to plug it in and just start using it. So for those reasons, we did not include how you would distribute a key, or if you would distribute a key to your users. And having gone through all of how we conducted our research and pulled it together, I'm going to hand it back over to Kevin, and he is going to unveil our demonstration, our prototype of Digital Bank.
Thanks, Judy. All right, let's launch into a demo. This will go by quickly, and then we're going to go through 7 highlights in sort of slow motion. But for the demo, you can go ahead and view that in the media player, and you can make it larger if you need to. Here we go to digitalbank-test.com. Now, this website is live on the open web, and you can go here yourself. This is a reference implementation. We used it for our research, but you can go there and experience the guidelines firsthand and go through the workflows, etc., using this reference site. Now, what I did just there is I registered for an account, which you can do. Obviously, it's a fictitious company that we call Digital Bank. And once you create an account, you can sign in. There's so many great UX best practices throughout this demo. And again, we're going to go through some highlights in a moment. But as you'll see here, we'll just walk you through what it looks like to add a security key. The first step there is adding a nickname for the security key. There's many, many reasons for this, and the guidelines go into details why. After you created the key, we're asking if you want to create a second key. Here I said no, and you can see right here, I can see the key I just registered when it was added, manufacturer's name, I could edit it, I could remove it, etc. And now when I go to sign in again, I can actually use the key for multi-factor authentication. Connect your security key, use key, I insert it, I tap it, and I'm in. Again, digitalbank-test.com. And you can create your own account, and you can use this live public reference implementation. All right, let's go into, so that was very quick and a quick demo, but now we want to drill into 7 highlights of the guidelines, and Judy's going to kick that off for us.
Thanks, Kevin. So the first one we're going to look at is promoting awareness, which I started touching on earlier when we were talking about the scope. And what we saw is that there was varying degrees about making it aware. There were some companies when we did our audit that, they had a banner, they were like, yep, link here. There were others that we looked at that even though we knew that they had keys, that they offered security keys, we were digging and trying to find where they were and sharing amongst the task force how to find them because it was so difficult. So be loud, be proud, as I said before. Let your users know that they're there. We have an example here that's in the digital bank that we just showed you. We recommend increasing security of your accounts by adding an additional authentication method below. And there's a link, and that's the easiest way. We have it. Here's a link. Go to it. And you might want to do that either on your homepage when users first log in, pre-sign in rather, or you could do it on your sign-in page somewhere around username, password, that there's an alternative method, or even post sign-in, you could have it. But it's important to let them know, make it easy for them to find how to enroll, maybe a link or by saying the path, but really just letting them know that it's out there. Likewise, another thing that we found when we were doing our audit was making security itself discoverable as a main menu item. So a lot of people have security keys, have a security section. Some people are displaying it prominently, as we did here in our demo. We're showing it here. Others, not so much. And again, we had to dig down just to find, how do I manage security? And people right now are so security conscious with all the phishing and all the other fraud and scams you hear going on. People are security conscious and they want to know, how do I manage my own security? So make it obvious where your security section of your site is so that people can find it easily, and they'll know that that's where anything related to security keys or other authentication tools may be located. Kevin, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Number 3. Now, if there's any UX designers in the audience, you might be familiar with this concept of progressive disclosure. So the highlight number 3 is progressively disclose information about security keys. As Judy mentioned, the participants that we recruited, about half of them have already used security keys, and the other half fit that prosumer persona, and were security conscious, but haven't used security keys. Even people who have already used security keys, and some of them who have already used security keys for years, they still had so many questions about how they really work and what information is really shared, and can I really use the key on more than one site? There were a lot of foundational questions that just weren't answered. So we spent a significant amount of time in the research project understanding what those questions are that these folks have about security keys. And then we progressively disclosed those answers to those questions throughout the experience, throughout the website. Now here you're just seeing one example where the screenshot from the user interface where you could learn more. And if you were interested in learning more, you can get some more information. The concept of progressive disclosure allows people who are interested to get more information, but not burdening all your customers with all the information at once. So we recommend using this cascading sort of revealing of information over time in different places throughout the interface. And I'm going to say it again and keep saying it. All those answers to those questions and the way in which those are answered in clear ways, that's really just text. A lot of times it ends up being copy that we had to write and then test and then rewrite and then test and then rewrite. We really hope that you go to get the guidelines So you can copy that text, use this text, use these answers that we've developed, and use them in your own experiences. Judy, I'll hand it over to you for 4 and 5.
Great, thank you. So the next 2 items, 4 and 5, have to deal with having multiple keys, multiple security keys registered on the site. And this is really important and should be explained in the education pieces, as Kevin was saying, progressively when it's important for the user. So that comes in various phases. So making sure that they know about it. So for example, here on the confirmation page may have preceded this where we say, congratulations, you just registered your key. Only 1 key is registered. We recommend adding at least 2 in case one is lost or stolen. And the importance of using keys has multiple reasons, but the 2 primary reasons is 1, for account recovery. In case you lose a key, there's always another one that you have handy, and you don't have to worry about how you get back into your account. The second reason is for ease of use. If you have multiple keys, you may have one in your office, you may have one at home, you may have one at your parents' house, or wherever you might spend a lot of other time, or on your keychain, or wherever. I spoke with one gentleman who kept it in a safety deposit box so that he always knew that he had 1 key left that he did not lose. He was always safe. That's an extreme case, but it depends on what your situation is. And what we saw in some sites is that there was one site that said, oh, only 1, you've registered a key. Okay, great, thanks. That's it, done. Did not suggest another one, nothing. Another site limited you to 2 keys, which could be a little bit too restrictive. So really think about how many keys should be used in light of account recovery and ease of use, and how many you might want to have available, for your users to use. And, complementary to this is being able to captively prompt to add multiple keys. So what this means is that as a user it gets a confirmation that they have added their key, you may say, would you like to add another key? This is in our flow, and we actually saw it in 1 or 2 of the sites that we audited. Once you've added one, before they close out of adding the key, before they close out of that flow, it's like, great, you did it. Do you want to add another one? Or no, I'm done. This is like my 3rd, 4th, I'm good here. But they're forced to proactively think about it. And do I need to add another key? Do I have enough? Maybe I'll come back later. So it really forces them to think about it. Be assertive here. You want to make sure it's in the best interest of not only the customer, but for the site itself, to make sure that people have the right amount of keys and that they're able to access their information. Kevin, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Number 6, keep the key management experiences on a single page. This may seem really simple and obvious. And in fact, ultimately, it is very simple. But we saw many reference sites in our audit that didn't take this approach. If you look at what we're showing on screen, we have the name of the key, we have some actions you can take with that key, and we have some metadata around that key. And at a lot of sites that we looked at, they were separating these 3 or 4 different components into different parts of the user interface. So I may know that I have some keys, but I don't know what the names of them are. I have to click in and drill into that. I may know that I have my key that I called USB-C key, but I don't know how to remove it because I have to click in multiple layers in order to remove it. The guidance and best practice here is keep all that information and keep the actions on a single page without having to drill down multiple clicks or to load modal dialog boxes. This really, really helped users build confidence with the system. And when they build confidence, they have control of the system and they know what's going on. It builds trust with the brand. So user experience, that's that correlation between ease of use and trust with the brand. Certainly in regulated industry, which we were targeting here, that trust is just so important. And then lastly, we'll go to number 7. This is going to be a mouthful. I'll say it and then I'll unpack what it all means. Put people in control of when the security key operating system prompts are initiated at sign-in. Okay, so what does that mean? During a security key workflow, you have a couple different pieces of hardware and software involved. Let's say you're on a laptop, which is what we tested for, and you have your hardware security key, and you have the browser that you're in. Now, if you're in the browser and you're on a website and you're asked to use a key, the browser actually hands off to another interface that's controlled by the browser/operating system of that laptop. These moments where that control is handed off to the operating system, it's really important to get those experiences right. And what we're showing here is when you use a security key, it hands off to the operating system. The operating system's waiting. It's waiting for you to insert your key and touch it. So we don't want to push people right into that experience, because what we found were a lot of people were anxious when that operating system prompt appeared without them wanting it to appear yet. The reason is their key might be in the other room. Their key might be in the car. Their key might be upstairs. They wanted to have a system where, hey, I'm about to use my security key, and it's very simple. It says, when you're ready to authenticate, click use the security key button. They say, okay, I got to go get it. I'm going to get it out of the drawer or get it out of the other room, plug it into the computer. When they're ready, use security key. Then when that operating system prompt appears, it's no problem. They're ready. There's no anxiety. There's no fear of timeouts and other things that might happen. So again, this thing seems simple and ultimately is, but it's good to have these best practices in place to make sure that the systems are really easy to use. All right, I think we've said it 3 or 4 times. We'll say it again. We went through 7 highlights, but there's so many best practices. There's a lot more than 7 in the guidelines themselves. So you want to go to fidoalliance.org/UX-guidelines. As Megan mentioned, you're going to find 2 sets of guidelines there, one for platform authenticators and one for security keys. Naturally, the one we're talking about today is for security keys. We want you to read through those. We want you to copy and paste. We want you to use the assets from the work that we did, leverage the prototype that we created, etc. And we mentioned that we'll have time for Q&A. We definitely do. But before we get into Q&A, Megan has some final thoughts that she wants to share, and then we'll start answering questions. Megan, over to you.
Thank you. And thanks, Kevin and Judy, for that great presentation. I just wanted to mention that the FIDO Alliance's UX committee is made up of some of the best UX minds all around the world, and we just thank them for their work and the projects that they're doing, because they're just doing amazing work. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't mention that FIDO Alliance will be hosting its Authenticate conference next month. So if you have more interest in all things FIDO, I would urge you to either attend with us in Seattle or virtually. Just visit authenticatecon.com. Kevin and Judy will be on site and doing some UX sessions, and there'll be other usability and there will be passkey information. And I see a lot of questions about that in here. So please do join us. And if you have any questions, just let us know. And with that, let's go to Q&A. So you can leverage the Q&A widget. We do have a bunch of questions in here already. So let me just kick things off with the first question, which is the audience. So these guidelines were conducted with consumers, or the testing was conducted with consumers, can the guidelines be applied to workforce scenarios?
So do you want me to start with this one, Kevin, and then you can add in? So we were actually talking about this, and to a degree, yes, they can. It's coming from a different context, but if you think about the 5 parts of the scope that we were talking about, the awareness, you still want to make users aware that that security keys are going to be available. You still want to consideration, educate them on why they're being used. So those 2 might be skewed a little bit differently, but the other 3 principles along the lines of, now I have to remember them, it was sign in and trying to remember them. Oh, enrollment, authentication, and management. Those 3 are pretty much those are going to stay the same. They should lift and shift between enterprise and customer pretty easily. It just might be a little bit of a different focus on awareness and education, and what you're going to be focusing on, and how you're, I'm going to say, spinning it, or how you're marketing it to an enterprise user rather than a customer. Kevin, anything you wanted to add?
No, although we, just to reiterate what you already said, I mean, although we tested for a consumer prosumer use case, if you're about to implement for a workforce use case, still go look at the guidelines. There's still a lot of applicable best practices in there that are applicable to both consumer or workforce.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned this earlier, Kevin, but a question around the language and graphics from the guidelines, are those available to the general public?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely, they are available. And right now, the text is absolutely available. Now, there's also many screenshots of the prototype that you can also lift from and use. There's also the prototype itself, which you could lift from and use graphic assets from that as well. So absolutely, the text is there for products that have originated these kinds of workflows before. You know how much time goes into creating the right kind of text and messaging. So yeah, please copy and paste what we've created. It's available and free, and we want the community to use it, and we also want the community to give us some feedback.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most interesting things for me as a non-UX expert in taking part in the testing and subsequent guidelines, and just kind of seeing the process, is that I think a lot of folks think of this as like screens and graphics, but the text actually was probably the thing that I think the group spent the most time on and really focused on in the testing. And so it's so important. Hey, this has been tested, just grab it and, and go with it. And it also will help to ensure consistency across implementations, which is huge for consumers, especially. So that's all there for the taking. So moving on to, so
I'll just add one more.
Yeah,
sorry, I'll just add one more thing. Yeah. So as I think you had mentioned, username and password is just so common and used, and everybody knows exactly what to do. So by borrowing or using outright the language that's in here, we get that common experience, Megan, that you were just saying, that consistency, so that eventually using security keys will be as common and as ingrained as using a username password, which is what we're hoping to get to. So that there's that standard, that reflex muscle that gets built when they see it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple questions just regarding the scope that I just wanted to just touch on. One of the questions is where like how folks were they issued hardware, or you may have covered this, but were they issued hardware? Did they already have hardware? How did that part work? Was that in scope or out of scope? And the other one that I saw that was actually, the other piece is actually, could you touch more on the naming of the security key part of the research? So those are two separate
Sure.
things.
Okay. Judy, should I run with some of those?
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So the first question was around participants and did we send them keys? Yes, we did. So if you remember, half the participants already had security keys and had used security keys. The other half fit the persona of a security-minded consumer, but did not have a key yet. And we did ship them keys. That was part of the logistically, that actually was harder than it for the consumer use case. But yes, we did. The second question, Megan, you might have to remind me, it was around naming of the keys.
Yeah, naming keys.
So it is a best practice to name the keys. And the question for us was, okay, we know we're going to include the naming of the key in these workflows, but where do we put it? Do we allow somebody to register a key, or do you name a key and then you register? And we tested both workflows, and it was better to start the process with naming the key. In UX, there's something called the endowed progress effect, and won't get into the psychology of it, but that's really what's at play with starting with the naming of the key first, and then you actually go through the ceremony of registering it.
And naming the keys, just to add on to that was great, Kevin, it's important to name the keys, because if you do have multiple keys, you might tag your keys differently. You might keep one, as I said when we were speaking, you may keep one at home and one in the office and one in your keychain. So you may name the key just that, home key, car key, whatever. So that way you can distinguish amongst them. So should one get lost or whatever, you know which one to remove and to replace. So naming them gets very important when you have the multiple keys, which we do encourage.
Right. So another question sort of about scope or maybe future plans is the ability for passwordless logins with security keys. Was that considered as part of the testing? And if not, is that something that might be part of like future testing? That would include like the biometric enabled keys. Yeah.
So it was specifically out of scope for this research to test passwordless authentication with security keys. We could have taken that path, but with this kind of research, we can't boil the ocean. We want to go what's the scenario that we can test and create best practices for that's going to be most applicable to the widest range of use cases out there in the world. So that's what we went with. Now we could have done other research in other niche use cases or emerging use cases, but again, our scope was, hey, what's going to give the community the biggest bang for the buck? And so we didn't go with the biometric security key on this particular research, and we didn't go with passwordless using the security key.
Oops. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just knocked over my seltzer can. A bunch of questions around whether you discuss passkeys in the scope of the research, and also like if passkeys are going to be the focus of any future research.
Judy, either one of us can hit that.
Yeah, I think
I'll just mention. Yeah, I'll just mention on passkey. Passkey wasn't part of this research, but the FIDO Alliance UX committee does have a project that's starting to be worked on around passkey research. So definitely stay tuned at fidoalliance.org, or if you're not on the email list, you can get on the email list and you'll definitely know when the passkey UX research guidelines are available.
Yeah, and when we were doing this research earlier this year, passkeys were just starting to be really, really talked about, and that was when it was becoming more broadly known. So it was not yet prevalent like it's being talked about so much now. And we also just wanted to focus on one item at a time. So as Kevin mentioned, last year we worked on platform authenticators. This year, earlier this year, we're working on security keys, and coming up will be passkeys next. So just to make sure that we did each of them service and gave as much good thought as we could, and give all our energy to one thing at a time, get it in, get it right, and then move to the next, is the approach that we thought would be most useful.
So stay tuned on the passkey topic.
Yes, for sure.
Regarding the registration of multiple keys, which is the best practice, Judy, that you mentioned earlier, could you touch on again what the optimal flow would be for registering or prompting the user to register multiple keys? For example, is it better to do that during the initial enrollment, or is that better to do in later logins, or was that tested at all?
So as far as what we determined to be optimal, was as they enter a key, we included it in the flow of every time a key was entered or enrolled. We said, "Oh, thank you for putting this up. Would you like to add another one?" So really a captively prompting, as it says, when you're confirming, congratulations, you've added a key, the next slider on that slide should be, would you like to add another? And then they're consciously making the decision. And that's each and every time they enter a key, be it their first key, second key, or fourth key. Just making sure that they're thinking about it, and it's always present in their mind that they should be considering that for multiple reasons, as we said, for ease of use for wherever they happen to be, and also for account recovery. And you want to balance that out and make sure you don't have so many keys, but you just want to, what is comfortable for the individual. As far as considering it in the research, I know we worked on the wording and making sure that where it was placed and how it was placed and what the wording was, we went through as part of our research. Kevin, anything you want to add about the research side of it?
No, that's a great question, and you covered it really well with number 5 here.
Was it contemplated at all to add additional language to that screen to explain why adding another key would be optimal if they've only registered one, for example? Would there be any benefit to explaining why adding another key would be optimal there? Did you consider that when you built out that screen?
Well, we do say that in case it's lost and stolen. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so these graphics that we're showing are sort of abstracted. They're kind of just the punchline, the very, very high level of what's included in the interface. But really encourage to fully answer that question, go get the guidelines.
Yeah, it's
because
in there.
There's all kinds of guidance around there's more than just the words and these 2 buttons that are here on number 5. There's more to it than this. This is just showing the high level concept.
And that goes to the awareness and the consideration of making sure that you have the learn more or the eye in a circle, or every firm does it differently. Every site has it slightly differently, but it's basically a learn more and education button that someone can click on to learn more about why or how, or it's a banner or a tagline or a footer. But that goes back to making sure that users are aware and that they're educated. But that's definitely an insightful question, and one that glad you asked so we could reiterate the importance of educating the users.
Megan, we'll beat this horse to death. Even if you look at the user journey. So if you look at the screen, these 5 main goals, and then these roughly 12 or dozen different process steps underneath. This concept of multiple keys, they're interspersed throughout the journey. So it's not one moment in time. It's not just one touch point to emphasize the use of multiple keys. There's multiple touch points that hit that same topic of using multiple keys.
Yeah, so as I said, it comes up in awareness and consideration for the education and making it obvious in the education, but also in the enrollment process where they add a key and we captively say, do you want to add another? Then it comes up again in management of being able to add and remove keys through a security center type process. And then authentication, it's, which key are you using to sign in with?
We are getting to, I really appreciate for our attendees the interest here, because we do have a lot of questions, and I promise that if we don't get to yours, because we are reaching the top of the hour, I think I have time for one more, that we will go through them and get back to you, because we do think this is great, the interest here. You just mentioned removing of keys. There's a question regarding whether the guidance is covering at all like deprovisioning of keys or like best practices for removing keys that a user may no longer want or have or they lost, for example.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Or do you have it, Kevin?
Yeah, I can say some thoughts, and Judy, welcome. I'd love to hear your thoughts too. So removing a security key or deprovisioning a security key was definitely in scope for us to look at how to best craft an experience that allows people to know that they can remove a key, and then have them remove a key and be confirmed that it has been removed. So most of that research was focused on the user experience, the words, the flows, to make sure that that task is very well understood and easily accomplished. What we didn't get into by design was testing different security policies. We didn't seek to test perception of different security policies of if you feel your account was compromised, what's the best action for you to take? Those sorts of things we didn't get into because they were simply out of scope for this research. And each company, each website and brand is going to have their own security controls and requirements that are going to be unique to them.
Yeah, when it comes down to the policies around security and all of that, it is very unique. You have the highly regulated industry that it's very prescribed. You have other industries that they'll have their own method, they'll have their own standards within an industry, but it's not regulated. And each company will have something more personalized or discrete to itself of what they do and how they handle. So because of the huge, wide, varying nature of it, we did not get into the individual policies.
All right, well, thank you. I do need to wrap things up now, but I do want to thank you all in the audience for all of your questions. Again, we will respond to you if we didn't have a chance to address them here. And please join me in thanking Judy and Kevin for their time today, and also, of course, for their great work along with the rest of the UX committee on this research and the guidance. And again, go please get the guidance at fidoalliance.org/UX-guidelines. And we hope to see you on a future webinar. Thanks again. Bye-bye.